In a world where whispers travel faster than the wind, a single glance can shatter the fragile balance of a carefully arranged life. While others twirl their fans with practiced charm, she stands unnoticed until the moment that changes everything. A gaze meets hers, stirring a dangerous spark that neither duty nor decorum can contain. Now envy coils in the shadows, tongues sharpen with malice, and a secret trembles on the edge of revelation. When desire collides with expectation, which truth will survive? Before we begin, tell me, from where are you listening, and what do you love most about historical romances? In the golden haze of a Cotswolds afternoon, where honey-coloured stone cottages huddled against rolling green hills, Eleanor Hargrove stood at the edge of the village green, her heart pounding like a caged bird. The year was 1815, and the air hummed with the chatter of the annual harvest fair in the quaint town of Chipping Campden, England. Laughter spilled from the tents, where fiddlers scraped lively tunes and vendors hawked spiced cider and fresh-baked pies. But Eleanor felt none of it. At 22, with her dark curls pinned beneath a simple bonnet of straw and muslin, she watched her cousins, Lydia and Kitty Beaumont, twirl among a cluster of eager young gentlemen, their fans snapping like playful whips. Lydia, the bold one at 19, leaned close to Mr. Thomas Ridley, a rosy-cheeked farmer's son with ambitions far beyond his acres. "Oh, sir, your tales of the hunt make my pulse race faster than a fox on the run," she purred, her fan fluttering to hide a coy smile. Kitty, ever the mimic at 18, giggled beside her, batting lashes at Mr. Frederick Hale, a merchant's heir whose pockets jingled with promise. "And you, Mr. Hale, with eyes like polished chestnuts, do tell me more of your travels to London. I vow, you've seen wonders I can only dream of." Eleanor sighed, adjusting the faded ribbons on her gown, a modest empire waist dress of soft wool in muted blue, befitting her status as the orphaned cousin living under her aunt's roof. Her parents had left her nothing but memories and a quiet spirit, and now she served as companion to the Beaumont sisters, their beauty and vivacity casting her forever in shadow. While they flirted shamelessly, drawing admirers like moths to flame, Eleanor lingered on the periphery, content with the wildflowers she gathered for her aunt's table. Yet deep down, a flicker of envy stirred. What would it feel like to be seen, truly seen, beyond pity or convenience? The crowd parted then, and a hush rippled through the fair like wind over wheat. Carriages rumbled to a stop at the green's edge, their polished black lacquer gleaming under the sun. Out stepped the Marquess of Ashford, Edward Blackwood, a widower of 35, whose name whispered through the county like a ghost story. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the quiet authority of a man who had faced tempests and emerged scarred but unbowed. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes, storm-grey and piercing, held the weight of loss. His wife had perished in childbirth 3 years prior, leaving him to raise a young daughter alone at his estate, Blackwood Hall, perched on the hills overlooking the village. The villagers bowed and curtsied, but Edward waved them off with a gloved hand, his greatcoat of fine wool swirling as he surveyed the scene. He had come not for revelry, but duty, overseeing the fair's charities for the parish poor, a role his late father had instilled in him. Yet as he strode forward, his gaze snagged on the sisters. Lydia and Kitty, spotting opportunity, abandoned their lesser suitors and glided toward him, fans at the ready. "Your lordship," Lydia breathed, dipping low enough to display the lace trim of her sprigged muslin gown. "What an honour to see you among us common folk. The fair pales without your presence." Kitty chimed in, her voice a trill. "Indeed, sir. Pray, join us. We could show you the finest stalls, perhaps a dance later, if the fiddlers oblige." Edward inclined his head politely, his expression a mask of courteous detachment. "Ladies, your enthusiasm graces the day, but I am here on estate matters." His tone was even, betraying no warmth, and he stepped past them toward the charity booth, where baskets of bread awaited distribution. Deflated but undeterred, the cousins exchanged glances and hurried after him, their laughter forced now, laced with determination. Eleanor, unnoticed, had drifted closer, compelled by the Marquess's quiet dignity. She clutched her posy of daisies and lavender, the scent grounding her amid the whirl. As Edward paused to hand a loaf to an elderly widow, his eyes lifted and met Eleanor's. Time fractured in that instant. No words passed, no flourish of fan or flirtatious quip. Just a glance, raw and unguarded, that pierced the veil of her solitude. In his stormy gaze, she saw not the titled lord, but a man adrift, echoing her own hidden ache. A faint curve touched his lips, the barest acknowledgement, before he turned away to his duties. Eleanor's cheeks burned. What madness was this? A Marquess and a girl like her? Yet, as the fair buzzed on, with her cousins circling him like hopeful butterflies, she couldn't shake the spark. Little did she know that single glance had ignited a fire that would upend their worlds, drawing them into a dance of secrets, scandals, and a love fierce enough to defy the rigid lines of society. But for now, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the green, Eleanor slipped away to the cottage path, her heart whispering of possibilities she dared not name. What secrets did the Marquess harbour, and why did her cousin's pursuit suddenly feel like a gathering storm? The days following the harvest fair blurred into the familiar rhythm of life in Chipping Campden, where the Cotswolds hills cradled the village like a benevolent giant. Eleanor Hargrove awoke each morning in the modest Beaumont household, a stone cottage on the edge of town, its thatched roof sagging under the weight of autumn rains. At 22, she had long since accepted her role as the quiet anchor to her aunt's lively brood. Her uncle, Mr. Reginald Beaumont, a prosperous wool merchant of middling means, presided over the family with a jovial but firm hand. His ledgers always balanced against the uncertainties of trade. Aunt Margaret, sharp-eyed and ambitious, orchestrated their social calendar with the precision of a conductor, dreaming of elevating her daughters into higher circles. Eleanor's chamber was a small nook off the sisters' larger room, furnished with a narrow bed, a chipped washstand, and a single window overlooking the herb garden. She dressed in the dim light of a tallow candle, slipping into a morning gown of plain cambric, its high neckline fastened with bone buttons. No frills for her, no embroidered shawls or jewelled brooches like those adorning Lydia and Kitty. Her dark hair, thick and unruly, she tamed into a simple knot, secured with a tortoiseshell comb inherited from her mother. Breakfast awaited in the parlour, where the family gathered around a scarred oak table, laden with porridge, fresh bread, and weak tea. "Good morning, Cousin Eleanor," Lydia trilled that crisp October dawn, 3 days after the fair. She lounged in her chair, a vision in a ruffled wrapper of pale pink silk, her golden curls artfully dishevelled. At 19, Lydia Beaumont was the family's jewel, her laughter a weapon in the marriage mart. "You were positively ghostly at the fair. Did the Marquess's arrival startle you so?" Kitty, 18 and eager to echo her sister, spooned her porridge with exaggerated care. Her freckled face lit with mischief, dressed already in a day gown of sprigged cotton, its puffed sleeves a nod to the latest London fashion smuggled via her father's contacts. "Oh yes, we nearly had him, Lydia. That stern face of his, imagine thawing it with a well-timed waltz, but he slipped away like smoke." Aunt Margaret entered then, her sturdy figure swathed in a bombazine dress, the fabric whispering against the floorboards. She set down a basket of mending, her lips pursed. "Girls, mind your tongues. The Marquess of Ashford is no plaything for flirtations. Edward Blackwood lost his wife tragically. Childbirth, poor soul, and he's buried himself at Blackwood Hall ever since. But mark my words, a widower of his station won't stay alone forever. Lydia, Kitty, you've the looks to catch his eye if you play it right. Eleanor poured tea silently, her hands steady despite the flutter in her chest. The glance from the fair lingered in her mind like a half-remembered dream, those grey eyes holding a depth that mirrored her own losses. Her parents' carriage accident 5 years prior had left her orphaned and dependent, shuttled to the Beaumonts' care. She loved her cousins truly, but their boldness chafed against her reserve. "The fair was lively," she murmured, passing the bread. "The charities did well, thanks to his lordship's oversight." Uncle Reginald chuckled from behind his newspaper, the Cotswold Gazette, its ink still fresh with local gossip. A portly man in his 50s, with a waistcoat straining at the buttons and a watch fob glinting on his chain, he embodied the village's sturdy mercantile spirit. "Aye, Blackwood's a fair sort. Keeps to himself, though. Heard he turned down invitations to the assembly rooms in Morton in Marsh last season. Mourning, they say, but with a daughter to marry off some day, he'll need an heir." The conversation flowed like the stream outside, meandering through plans for the upcoming market day. Eleanor listened, her thoughts drifting to the hills beyond the cottage. The Cotswolds' air carried the scent of damp earth and sheep wool, a comforting blanket over the rigid hierarchies that governed their world. Ladies of their station navigated life through calls, teas, and church Sundays, where glances spoke volumes and a misplaced word could seal a reputation. For Eleanor, companion to the sisters, it meant endless stitching, letter writing, and fading into the background, useful but unseen. As the meal ended, Aunt Margaret turned to her. "Eleanor, dear, accompany the girls to the village this afternoon. Mrs. Hargrove—" "No, wait, that's your name, isn't it? Silly me. Fetch some ribbons from the haberdasher, and keep an eye on Lydia. She's prone to dawdling with those Ridley boys." Eleanor nodded, suppressing a smile. The walk into Chipping-Campden proper took them along winding lanes, flanked by hedgerows heavy with berries. The town bustled gently, blacksmiths hammering at forges, maids carrying baskets to the market square, where stalls overflowed with cheeses, apples, and bolts of cloth. Lydia and Kitty linked arms, their bonnets bobbing as they whispered and giggled, drawing nods from passers-by. Eleanor trailed a step behind, her basket swinging lightly. At the haberdashery, a bell tinkled as they entered the dim shop, shelves lined with spools of silk and lace. The proprietress, Mrs. Ellis, a wiry woman with a lace cap pinned crookedly, greeted them warmly. "Miss Beaumonts and Miss Hargrove, ribbons for the winter balls, I suppose." "Indeed," Kitty replied, fingering a length of scarlet satin. "Something to catch a certain lord's eye." Laughter bubbled up, but Eleanor's gaze wandered to the window, where the road stretched toward Blackwood Hall's distant silhouette. A rumour had trickled through the fair, whispers of the Marquess seeking a governess for his daughter, little Lady Amelia, now 5 and motherless. Nothing more. But it stirred the air like an approaching frost. As they exited, arms laden with purchases, a carriage clattered past, its crest gleaming. The Ashford Arms, a black raven on silver. Inside, through the parted curtains, Edward Blackwood sat rigid, conversing with his steward. His eyes flicked outward, brushing the group for an instant. Eleanor's breath caught. Did he see her, or was it mere chance? That evening, back at the cottage, the family gathered by the hearth. Firelight danced on the walls, casting shadows that played like secrets. Uncle Reginald read aloud from the Gazette, his voice rumbling. "Ah, here's something. The Marquess hosts a small supper at Blackwood Hall next week for parish benefactors. Invitations forthcoming, no doubt." Aunt Margaret's eyes gleamed. "We'll be ready. Girls, practice your French. Eleanor, you'll help with the invitations." Excitement hummed, but as Eleanor retired to her nook, a folded note slipped from her aunt's correspondence pile caught her eye. Delivered by a village boy that afternoon, addressed to the Beaumonts in a bold hand. She shouldn't look, but curiosity pricked. Unfolding it hastily in the moonlight, She scanned the lines. A polite refusal from the Marquess's secretary, citing prior commitments for any social engagements. Yet scrawled at the bottom, almost overlooked, "Inquire after Miss Hargrove's well-being. She seemed unwell at the fair." Her pulse raced. Unwell. No, but seen. The note trembled in her fingers. What did it mean? And why, as the wind howled outside, did a whisper of unease settle in her bones, like the first crack in a frozen pond, threatening to pull them all under? The supper invitation arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day, shattering the fragile calm of the Beaumont cottage. It was a week after the fair, and the October winds had turned sharper, whipping leaves from the ancient oaks that lined the lane to Chipping Campden. Eleanor sat in the parlour, mending a tear in Kitty's favourite pelisse, the needle flashing in the firelight. The room smelled of beeswax polish and simmering stew from the kitchen, a scent that usually soothed her. But today her fingers trembled slightly, the Marquess's note from the correspondence pile still burning in her memory. Why had he inquired after her? A kindness, perhaps, or mere politeness extended to the aunt's household. Aunt Margaret burst through the door, her cheeks flushed beneath her lace cap, clutching a heavy vellum envelope sealed with black wax. The Ashford raven stared up from it, ominous and elegant. "Girls! Eleanor, come quick! This is it! The key to our fortunes!" Lydia and Kitty tumbled in from the garden, their aprons dusted with soil from picking late roses. Uncle Reginald lowered his pipe from the mantel, his eyes widening behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "What news, Margaret? Out with it." Aunt Margaret slit the seal with a butter knife, unfolding the crisp paper. Her voice rose with each line, reading aloud in a breathless cadence. "The Marquess of Ashford requests the pleasure of the company of Mr. and Mrs. Reginald Beaumont, Miss Lydia Beaumont, Miss Kitty Beaumont, and Miss Eleanor Hargrove at Blackwood Hall for supper on the 15th of October to discuss matters of parish charity and estate affairs. Oh heavens, we're in!" Excitement erupted. Lydia clapped her hands, her blue eyes sparkling. "Blackwood Hall! I've dreamed of those marble halls since I was a child. And supper with the Marquess himself. Imagine the silver, the crystal." Kitty twirled, her skirts flaring. "We'll wear our best gowns, Lydia, the ones from the London seamstress. And you, Eleanor, you'll need something finer than that drab wool. Aunt, we must send for fabric at once." Eleanor froze, the pelisse slipping from her lap. Her name, listed last, almost an afterthought. Yet there it was, pulling her from the shadows into the light. Her heart raced, a mix of dread and illicit thrill. "Me? But why? I'm no benefactor. Surely it's a mistake." Aunt Margaret waved a hand dismissively, though her gaze sharpened. "Nonsense, girl. Your family. And his lordship's note last week mentioned you specifically. Inquire after Miss Hargrove's well-being. Perhaps he pitied your pallor at the fair, or saw your quiet virtue. Either way, you'll come. It wouldn't do to refuse. Social suicide in a village this small. The tongues would wag for months." Uncle Reginald nodded, puffing thoughtfully. "Aye, the Marquess's suppers are no idle affairs. Blackwood Hall overlooks half the Cotswolds. From its windows, you can see to Stow-on-the-Wold. He's known for his charities, but also for his sharp eye on alliances. This could mean introductions to better connections, Reginald. Wool trade's steady, but a noble patron." The room buzzed with plans, gowns to be pressed, French phrases to rehearse, even a new ribbon for Eleanor's bonnet. But beneath the chatter, Eleanor felt the ground shift. Her world had always been the cottage's hearth, the village paths she walked alone, gathering herbs or delivering mending. To step into Blackwood Hall meant crossing an invisible line from companion to guest under the scrutiny of eyes that judged every curtsy, every word. Refusal would brand her ungrateful, perhaps even resentful of her cousin's chances, yet acceptance, it terrified her. That glance at the fair had been a spark. This invitation fanned it into flame. As the day waned, the family scattered to prepare. Eleanor retreated to the herb garden, the chill air biting through her shawl. She knelt among the lavender, plucking stems with mechanical care, her mind a whirlwind. What estate affairs required her presence? The governess rumour persisted in whispers at market. Lady Amelia, the Marquess's daughter, needed guidance, someone gentle yet firm. Could it be? No, absurd. She had no qualifications beyond book learning from her father's old volumes, dusty tomes of poetry and history shelved in the attic. Footsteps crunched behind her. Aunt Margaret loomed, arms crossed over her bombazine bodice. Brooding again, "Eleanor, this is your chance, child. Lydia and Kitty have the looks, but you have the poise. His lordship might seek a match for his girl, a companion even. Imagine, governess to a Marquess's daughter. It'd lift us all." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Aunt, I couldn't. I'm no teacher, and the cost, gossip would follow me like a shadow. The orphaned cousin playing at nobility." Margaret's face hardened. "Cost? The real cost is staying here, fading away while your cousins shine. The world's changing, even in these hills. Napoleon's defeated, trade's booming, opportunities for those bold enough. Refuse, and you'll regret it when Lydia weds up and leaves you to spinsterhood." The words stung, true as arrows. That evening, as rain pattered against the casements, Eleanor penned acceptances under her aunt's watchful eye. Her hand shook on the quill, ink blotting the page. Protocol demanded elegance. "Miss Eleanor Hargrove has the honour to accept." But inside, rebellion stirred. This supper wasn't just a meal, it was a summons, breaking the fragile status quo of her dependence. The 15th dawned misty, the Cotswolds cloaked in fog that clung to the valleys like regret. The Beaumonts' borrowed carriage, a sturdy gig from Uncle Reginald's yard, rattled up the winding drive to Blackwood Hall. The estate rose from the mist, a Georgian manor of pale stone, its wings flanked by manicured gardens, now skeletal in autumn. Servants in livery awaited, bows deep as the family descended. Edward Blackwood greeted them in the grand foyer, his presence filling the space like the crackle of a hidden fire. He wore a tailored coat of midnight blue superfine, white cravat knotted impeccably, his silver-threaded hair combed back. At 35, he carried his grief like a mantle, but tonight his grey eyes held a glint of purpose. "Mr. Beaumont, Mrs. Beaumont, welcome. Miss Lydia, Miss Kitty, and Miss Hargrove." His gaze lingered on Eleanor a fraction longer, steady and unreadable. She curtsied, her empire waist gown of borrowed lavender silk whispering against the marble floor. It felt foreign, the fabric too fine for her skin. "Your lordship," she murmured, voice barely above the echo. Supper unfolded in the dining hall, a cavern of mahogany and candlelight. Crystal goblets chimed, silverware gleamed on damask linens. Topics danced from parish poor relief to wool yields, Uncle Reginald holding forth with merchant's zeal. Lydia and Kitty fluttered like candles, praising the hall's tapestries, their fans a subtle Morse code of glances toward the Marquess. But midway through the venison course, Edward turned the conversation. "Miss Hargrove, your aunt mentioned your skill with letters and law. My daughter Amelia struggles with her studies. The village school suits her not. Too boisterous for a child so reserved. I seek a governess, one of gentle birth, to reside here. Temporarily, perhaps. Would you consider it?" The table fell silent. Forks paused. Eleanor's pulse thundered. Allies emerged in her uncle's approving nod. Aunt Margaret's triumphant smile. Antagonists, the cousins' narrowed eyes, sensing competition. Protocol loomed. Acceptance meant leaving the cottage, entering his world of etiquette and isolation, under constant watch from staff and society. Refusal, social exile, whispers of ingratitude rippling through Chipping Campden. "I hesitate, my lord," she said, meeting his gaze. The cost clawed at her, uprooted, exposed. Yet the spark from the fair urged her on. But for Lady Amelia's sake I might. Edward's lips curved faintly. Think on it. The position demands discretion, loyalty, no scandals, no divided attentions. As dessert arrived, syllabub in silver bowls, the weight settled. This was the rupture, a choice forced by circumstance, altering her path forever. But as the carriage bore them home through the lifting fog, a shadow stirred in Eleanor's mind. Who else coveted this role? And what hidden debts or vetoes from the past might bar her way, turning opportunity to peril? The days blurred into a tentative new rhythm after the supper at Blackwood Hall. Eleanor accepted the governor's position with a mix of resolve and trepidation, her aunt's insistence sealing the decision like wax on a letter. It was to be temporary, a trial of 2 months, starting with daily visits to the estate, then perhaps residency if all proved suitable. No grand upheaval yet, but the shift hummed beneath her skin like the first frost on the Cotswolds grass. She rose earlier now, her mornings filled with borrowed primers from Uncle Reginald's study, brushing up on French conjugations and simple arithmetic. The Beaumont cottage felt smaller, its walls pressing in with the cousins' sidelong glances. Her first true test came on a crisp Sunday in late October at the parish church in Chipping Campden. The stone edifice, with its weathered spire piercing the low clouds, drew the village like a magnet, gentry in the front pews, merchants and farmers behind. Eleanor walked the lane with the Beaumonts, her new role unspoken, but electric in the air. She wore a modest round gown of grey merino wool, its high waist cinched with a simple sash, a shawl of soft lamb's wool draped over her shoulders. No ostentation, governesses occupied a liminal space, neither servant nor equal, yet the weight of eyes already pulled at her. Inside, the nave echoed with murmured prayers and the rustle of prayer books. Aunt Margaret steered them toward a middle pew, whispering fiercely, "Smile, girls. And Eleanor, mind your posture. His lordship attends services faithfully. This is your proving ground." Lydia and Kitty flanked her, their Sunday best a stark contrast. Silk pelisses in pastel hues, bonnets trimmed with velvet ribbons that caught the candlelight filtering through stained glass. Lydia leaned close, her voice a silken thread. "Governess, indeed. Don't get ideas above your station, cousin. Amelia's a sweet child, but the hall's full of whispers. One wrong step and you'll be back mending hems." Kitty giggled softly, fanning herself despite the chill. "Yes, and we wouldn't want scandal. Imagine if you trip over a lesson and blame it on us." Eleanor's cheeks warmed, but she held her tongue, focusing on the vicar's droning sermon about charity and duty. Subtle humiliation laced their words, a reminder of her place, the orphaned relation, useful only as long as she didn't eclipse. Class friction simmered here in the divided aisles. The Beaumonts middling, the Marquess exalted. To accept his offer risked painting her as presumptuous, a climber in the eyes of those who knew her quiet ways. As the service ended, the congregation spilled into the churchyard, where gravestones stood like silent sentinels amid yew trees. Conversations bloomed, gossip about the harvest tithes, the latest wool prices. Eleanor lingered by a low wall, adjusting her bonnet when Edward Blackwood emerged from the vestry door. He walked alone, his daughter Amelia clutching his hand. The child, a wisp of 5 with chestnut curls and wide blue eyes, wore a frock of white dimity, her small face solemn. Edward nodded to acquaintances, his greatcoat of charcoal grey wool buttoned against the wind, but his gaze sought the crowd. It found Eleanor. A subtle nod, almost imperceptible, drew her forward. "Miss Hargrove," he said, his voice low and steady, like the roll of distant thunder. "A word, if you please. Amelia, greet our new friend." The girl curtsied shyly, her tiny hand extending a crumpled wildflower, a daisy, plucked from the path. "For you, miss. Papa says you're kind with books." Eleanor's heart softened. She knelt slightly, accepting the bloom, its petals fragile against her glove. "Thank you, Lady Amelia. Daisies are my favorite. They remind me of sunny meadows." A micro gesture from Edward followed. A brief touch to her elbow as he rose, steadying her balance on the uneven ground. Warmth seeped through the fabric, unspoken support amid the milling crowd. No words, just that shared silence, heavy with promise. In his eyes, she glimpsed approval, a quiet defense against the whispers she felt prickling her back. From the shadows of an adjacent yew, a figure watched, Mrs. Helena Thorpe, the Marquess's distant cousin and self-appointed guardian of Blackwood Hall's proprieties. At 40, widowed herself and childless, she resided at the estate as companion to Amelia, her sharp features framed by a lace-trimmed cap. Dressed in sombre bombazine, she observed with narrowed eyes, her fan tapping rhythmically against her palm. Helena had designs on steering the household, perhaps even influencing Edward toward a match that suited her ambitions. A union with gentry blood, not some village orphan. Eleanor's arrival threatened that. A subtle intrusion she noted like a fox scents a rival in the henhouse. The group dispersed slowly, but as Eleanor turned to rejoin her family, Mrs. Thorpe glided forward, her smile thin as parchment. "Miss Hargrove, is it? How quaint. The Marquess mentioned a governess trial. Do be careful. Children of quality require more than wildflowers and well-meaning glances. We wouldn't want misunderstandings." The words landed like a veiled barb, drawing titters from nearby matrons, Mrs. Ellis, the haberdasher, and old Widow Grant, their heads bent in conference. Rejection rippled outward, a subtle wave measuring her acceptance. Polite nods from some, but cooler stares from the higher pews. Class lines etched deeper. A governess was tolerated, not embraced. Yet as she walked home, the daisy tucked into her bodice, Eleanor felt a small advance. A brooch of silver and pearl slipped into her hand by Amelia under Edward's watchful eye. "Papa's gift for teachers," the child had whispered. It was an old piece, engraved with a raven motif, warm from recent wear. Starting its emotional arc, it symbolized trust, a token bridging their worlds. Edward's gaze lingered as she departed, a shared silence promising more, but that afternoon, as tea steamed in the Beaumont parlour, a visible consequence emerged. Uncle Reginald unfolded the Cotswold Gazette, his brow furrowing. "Listen to this, family. Local whispers at parish. The Marquess of Ashford trials a new governess from modest stock. Bold move or folly? Eyes on Blackwood Hall." The article was brief, unsigned, but its tone dripped insinuation, fodder for village tongues. Aunt Margaret clucked her tongue. "Gossip already. Who could have spread it?" Eleanor paled, the brooch heavy in her pocket. Helena's shadow loomed larger now, her watching eyes promising deeper interference. As dusk fell over the hills, a carriage rumbled past the cottage window, bound for Blackwood Hall, no doubt carrying more than invitations. What fresh trial awaited, and how long before the whispers turned to outright scorn? The November gales swept through the Cotswolds like vengeful spirits, rattling the leaded windows of Blackwood Hall and turning the lanes to rivers of mud. Eleanor arrived at the estate that stormy afternoon for her third daily lesson with Lady Amelia, her basket heavy with primers and a small slate. The trial governess role had settled into a fragile routine. Mornings at the Beaumont cottage, afternoons here, under the watchful eyes of the household staff. She wore a practical round gown of brown cambric, its hem already sodden from the dash from the waiting gig, a woolen cloak dripping onto the foyer tiles. At 22, she felt the weight of transition keenly, her quiet life fracturing like the thunder outside. Edward met her in the entrance hall, his broad frame silhouetted against the roaring fire in the drawing-room beyond. Rain lashed the panes, and the wind howled through the chimneys. "Miss Hargrove," he said, his voice cutting through the din, "you've braved the worst of it. Amelia awaits in the nursery, but I fear the roads will worsen. Stay the night if need be. No sense risking the return." Eleanor's pulse quickened at the offer, practical yet intimate. Confinement loomed, the storm a reluctant ally forcing proximity. "Thank you, my lord, if it pleases you." She curtsied, avoiding his gaze, those storm-grey eyes that seemed to see through her reserve. The nursery perched on the hall's upper floor, a warm haven amid the tempest. Shelves groaned under leather-bound volumes, fairy tales, histories, simple geographies, while a fire crackled in the grate, casting golden flickers over rag rugs and a dollhouse manor. Amelia, in her white frock with a pinafore, bounced on a cushioned stool, her curls damp from play. "Miss Eleanor, Papa says we're trapped by the rain. Will you read the story of the brave knight?" Eleanor smiled, kneeling to unpack her things. "Indeed, Lady Amelia, but first, your letters. The night can wait." The lesson flowed gently. Chalk scratches on slate, patient corrections, the child's laughter a balm. Yet as thunder boomed, Eleanor glanced at the window, where sheets of rain blurred the hills. No escape tonight. Supper came early, served in the family dining room to avoid the grand hall's chill. Edward joined them, Amelia between, the table set simply with silver and porcelain, venison pie steamed, flanked by root vegetables and a decanter of claret. The storm raged, isolating them in candlelight. "The winds carry echoes of the sea," Edward remarked, carving the pie. "Reminds me of Cornwall, where I courted my late wife." Amelia yawned, her eyes heavy. Eleanor tucked her into bed later, singing a soft lullaby her mother once hummed. Old words of meadows and stars. The child drifted off, clutching her doll, leaving Eleanor to descend the creaking stairs alone. The hall below felt vast, shadows pooling in corners. She wandered to the library, drawn by the scent of aged paper and leather, seeking a book to steady her nerves. Edward was there, by the hearth, a volume open on his knee. He rose at her approach, his shirt sleeves rolled, cravat loosened, a rare informality. "Can't sleep in this gale. The library's open to you, Miss Hargrove. Take what you will." She hesitated, fingers trailing a shelf of poetry. "Thank you. The storm. It stirs memories." Her hand closed on a slim book, her father's favourite, or so it seemed from the inscription inside. "To Edward, from father, on duty and loss." It was a collection of Wordsworth, the pages worn. He noticed. That one. It was a gift. After Eliza. His voice roughened, the first crack in his armour. He gestured to a pair of wing chairs by the fire. "Sit, if you wish. The night is long." They settled, the flames popping like distant gunfire. Eleanor opened the book, her voice soft as she read aloud, "I wandered lonely as a cloud." The words wove through the room, painting daffodils and waves. Edward listened, his gaze on the fire, but his body tensed, leaning forward as she paused. "You read with feeling," he said quietly. "Eliza loved poetry. She faded quickly, the childbed fever relentless." I held her hand, powerless. "Guilt lingers, you see, like this storm, unrelenting." Eleanor's throat tightened, layers peeled back in the firelight. "I understand loss, my lord, my parents. A carriage overturned on these very roads 5 years past. I was alone, shuttled to kin who see me as burden or shadow." Her words hung, vulnerable. The inherited book a bridge, Wordsworth's verses echoing their shared solitude. He turned to her, eyes softening, the silver at his temples catching the glow. "Not a burden, Miss Hargrove. You've brought light to Amelia already, and to this house." A gesture followed, a hand extended, not touching, but close enough to warm the air between. a tacit promise, trust in this forced intimacy. The emotional tide shifted from duty to something deeper, humanizing him, not the distant Marquess, but a man scarred by grief, seeking solace. They spoke then, voices low over the gale, of duties that chained them, his to estate and title, hers to survival amid ambitious cousins. Laughter slipped in, light as mist, her tale of Kitty's disastrous French accent, his dry recount of a pompous neighbour's fox hunt mishap. Tension hummed in the silences, glances lingering, gestures restrained, a shared shawl from a side table when chill seeped in. But as the clock struck midnight, a knock shattered the cocoon. Jenkins, the butler, entered with a silver tray, a sealed letter atop. "From Mrs. Thorpe, my lord, delivered by rider despite the weather. Urgent," she insists. Edward broke the seal, his face hardening as he scanned the lines. Helena's script was precise, accusatory, whispers of impropriety at church, the Gazette's gossip amplified. "The village murmurs of your new governess's boldness. Guard the hall's reputation or risk scandal touching Lady Amelia." The warmth ebbed. Edward folded the note, his jaw set. "Mrs. Thorpe oversteps. But caution is wise." Eleanor rose, the book clutched to her chest, the moment's glow dimming. Trust had bloomed, fragile as a hothouse flower, now threatened by shadows. As she retired to the guest chamber, thunder rumbling anew, a rider's approach echoed faintly below. What message or arrival would this storm truly bring, pulling her back from the edge of connection? The storm's fury broke with the dawn, leaving the Cotswolds sodden and subdued, the hills glistening under a pale November sun. Eleanor departed Blackwood Hall that morning, her cloak heavy with lingering damp, the Wordsworth volume tucked under her arm like a secret talisman. The gig splashed through puddles on the lane, back to the Beaumont cottage, her mind replaying the night's confessions, the Marquess's raw grief, her own unguarded words, the fragile warmth that had bloomed between them. Trust, tentative as a new bud, had taken root. Yet Helena Thorpe's letter cast a long shadow, its warnings like thorns ready to snag. At the cottage, normalcy awaited like a poorly mended seam. Aunt Margaret bustled in the kitchen, stirring a pot of barley soup while Uncle Reginald pored over trade ledgers by the hearth. Lydia and Kitty lounged in the parlour, heads bent over fashion plates from a borrowed ladies' magazine, their giggles sharp as needles. "Eleanor, you look half-drowned," Lydia remarked without glancing up, her quill scratching notes on gown trims. "Did the storm keep you at the hall all night? How convenient for lessons." Kitty smirked, fanning herself lazily. Indeed, Amelia must adore such devotion. Or was it the library that held you? Papa says the Marquess has quite the collection. Poetry, I hear, for lonely evenings. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but she busied herself hanging her cloak, the brooch from Amelia pinned discreetly to her bodice. The cousin's barbs stung deeper now, laced with envy since her role's confirmation. No outright accusation, but the air thickened with insinuation, their flirtations at the fair forgotten in favour of this new rivalry. She retreated to her nook, the Wordsworth book hidden beneath her pillow, its pages whispering of wandering souls. Word of the overnight stay spread like mist over the valleys. By midday, a village boy delivered a parcel from Mrs. Ellis's haberdashery. Ribbons ordered weeks prior, but wrapped with a note. "Heard you weathered the gale at Blackwood. Bold, Miss Hargrove. Tongues clack already." Eleanor's stomach knotted. Isolation crept in, subtle at first, the baker's wife nodding cooler at market, a matron averting her gaze during an errand. Her status teetered. Governess to nobility elevated her. Yet one whisper of impropriety could plunge her back to companion obscurity, or worse, pariah. The attack came that evening, frontal and venomous, shattering the fragile equilibrium. The family gathered for supper in the low-ceilinged dining room, candles guttering against draughts. Uncle Reginald unfolded the latest Cotswold Gazette, his face paling as he read aloud, voice faltering. Scandal at Blackwood Hall. Whispers abound of the Marquess of Ashford's new governess, a local miss of modest means, lingering through tempests in ways unbecoming a house of mourning. Is charity the guise for deeper intrigues? The parish watches. Aunt Margaret gasped, her spoon clattering. Heavens, who pens such filth? Eleanor! This reeks of sabotage. Lydia's eyes narrowed, feigning shock. Governess or temptress, the village will devour you, cousin. We warned you, stepping above your place invites ruin. Kitty nodded vigorously, though triumph gleamed in her gaze. And the Marquess, his daughter's reputation, his own, tarnished by association. You'll be dismissed by dawn. Eleanor sat frozen, the words a public wound. Slashing her budding alliance with Edward. The article, unsigned but reeking of Helena's precise hand, exposed her overnight stay, twisting innocence into scandal. No names, but Chipping Campton's small world knew, the orphaned Hargrove girl, alone with the widower lord. Reputations in their rigid society hinged on perception. Governesses walked a knife's edge. One misstep leading to exile from decent homes. Consequences cascaded swiftly, tangible as a slammed door. A knock echoed through the cottage. Jenkins, the Blackwood butler, stood on the threshold, hat in hand, rain beading on his livery. "Miss Hargrove," he murmured, eyes downcast. "A message from his lordship. The trial. Suspended. Mrs. Thorpe advises caution amid these rumours. Return your things to the hall tomorrow. A carriage will fetch you, but only for formal dismissal." The room spun. Loss of support hit like a gut punch. Edward's trust, so newly forged, cracked under the assault. No legal threat yet, but the threat loomed. Whispers could summon magistrates if spun as moral lapse, barring her from future positions. Her aunt's face hardened, weighing family ties against scandal's stain. "Eleanor, this jeopardizes us all. Lydia and Kitty's prospects, ruined by your folly." Uncle Reginald sighed, rubbing his temples. "The Wool Guild meets soon. I can't afford the Beaumont name dragged through mud. You'll go, girl, but quietly. No return here if it worsens." Isolation enveloped her. A sudden fall from the hall's warmth to this cold hearth. The cousins' alliance fractured. Their resentment, fueled by Helena's unseen hand, turned them from rivals to accusers. Eleanor's project, the governess role, her bridge to Edward, lay in ruins, her status plummeting to outcast. She clutched the brooch, its raven emblem mocking her now, a symbol compromised. That night, alone in her nook, tears came hot and silent. The point of no return had arrived. To fight the lies meant public confrontation, impossible for a woman of her station, dooming any return to quiet dependence. The Wordsworth book fell open to a marked page, Edward's underlining stark, "We are laid asleep in body and become a living soul." But whose soul? Hers, adrift now, severed from the man whose glance had awakened her. As moonlight filtered through the casement, another carriage rumbled past. Helena's, perhaps, returning from some covert meeting. Edward's silence deafened, an emotional exile pulling them apart. Would he retreat into his grief, leaving her to the wolves? Or would an ultimatum from the shadows force a final, irrevocable choice? The winter frost etched intricate patterns on the Beaumont cottage windows, turning the Cotswolds world into a crystalline cage. Eleanor Hargrove paced her cramped nook that December eve, the air thick with the scent of pine logs burning low in the hearth. 2 weeks had passed since Jenkins' grim summons, her dismissal from Blackwood Hall, a public scar that festered like an untreated wound. The village shunned her now. Matrons crossed the market square to avoid her path, whispers trailing her like smoke. Lydia and Kitty revelled in the shift, their flirtations renewed with local suitors, casting Eleanor sidelong glances of smug satisfaction. Aunt Margaret's lectures grew sharper, laced with regret over the foolish ambition that tainted the family name. Uncle Reginald buried himself in ledgers, his once jovial nods replaced by averted eyes. Isolation clawed at her, but beneath the despair, resolve hardened. The brooch, that silver raven token from Amelia, lay on her washstand, its engraving catching the candle's flicker, and the Wordsworth volume, returned with her belongings, but not before she spied a loose page within, a folded letter tucked like a forgotten verse. She had claimed it in haste during the carriage ride home, guilt pricking her then. Now, alone, she unfolded it under the quilt's cover, heart hammering. The script was Edward's, bold, angular strokes from years past. Dearest Eliza, duty binds me to this title, a chain forged in father's will. But guilt shadows every step. The estate's debts from the wars linger, hidden even from kin. Helena knows, presses for alliance to secure it all. Forgive my coldness, it shields you from the storm. Dated before Eliza's death, it painted a man not distant by nature, but forged in obligation, his reserve a armor against threats that could unravel Blackwood Hall. Eleanor's breath caught. Debts? Helena's hand in the scandals. The pieces aligned like stars, emerging from cloud. Mrs. Thorpe, with her precise barbs and watchful eyes, wasn't mere guardian. She schemed, manipulating rumors to oust Eleanor and corner Edward into a marriage that would settle those hidden ledgers. Proof mounted in memory. The Gazette's timely poison, the churchyard glare, the stormy letter's urgency. No mere jealousy, a calculated plot, twisting Eleanor's innocence into leverage. Dawn broke grey and unrelenting. Eleanor rose, dressing in her grey merino gown, its hem frayed from hurried walks. She couldn't retreat. Silence would doom her utterly. Agency surged, a quiet fire. In the parlour, while the family breakfasted on hasty porridge, she penned a letter to Edward, quill steady despite trembling hands. My lord, the shadows lengthen, but truth illuminates. Enclosed, a token of clarity. I seek no pity, only justice, for the slanders that part us. Your devoted servant, Eleanor Hargrove. She slipped the found letter inside, sealing it with wax from Uncle Reginald's desk. Stolen in defiance. Delivering it meant risk, crossing village eyes that branded her fallen. But hope flickered. If Edward's coldness stemmed from duty's weight, not disdain, this could reframe them. Trust rebuilt on shared burden, not fleeting glances. She ventured out, bonnet low, the muddy lanes sucking at her half-boots. Blackwood Hall loomed distant, but she aimed for the village post first, then a detour to the vicar's study. Testimony was needed. The church held records, neutral ground. The vicar, Reverend Hale, a kindly man of 60 with ink-stained cuffs, received her in his cluttered study, shelves bowed under parish ledgers. Miss Hargrove, amid such talk, bold, but speak. She laid bare the overnight innocence, the storm's confinement, Helena's escalating whispers. He nodded gravely, pulling a worn diary from a drawer, his own notes on estate matters. Mrs. Thorpe visited thrice last month, inquiring after the Marquess's finances. Debts from the Peninsula campaigns, yes. Whispers of mortgages on the home woods. She pushes for a union with her nephew, a baronet of middling fortune, to consolidate. Your arrival disrupted. Proof solidified. A ledger entry glimpsed. Helena's signature on a loan query. Reverend Hale's testimony, verbal but weighty, altered the tide, a peak of hope, Eleanor's words shifting perception from scandal to sabotage. I'll speak at the parish assembly, he promised. Truth over tittle-tattle. Emboldened, she pressed onto the hall's gates, the letter clutched like a shield. Guards waved her through, Edward's orders perhaps. In the foyer, Jenkins bowed. His lordship awaits in the library, miss. The storm's letter. Idum moved him. Edward stood by the window, sunlight slanting across his face, etching lines of weariness. No greatcoat now, a simple waistcoat of fine wool, sleeves rolled as before. "Eleanor," he said, voice rough with unspoken relief. Not Miss Hargrove, a reapproximation intimate yet contained. He held the unfolded missive, eyes meeting hers without storm's veil. "You saw the truth I hid. Guilt, not coldness, kept me distant. Eliza knew the debts. Helena exploits them, weaving lies to force my hand. Your courage, it frees me to fight." She stepped closer, the air charged but restrained. No touch, just shared gaze. Trust weaving stronger than passion's pull. "I couldn't let shadows win, my lord. For Amelia, for us." A faint smile touched his lips, guilt's mask cracking, revealing the man beneath, duty-bound, but drawn to her quiet strength. But valleys loomed swift. Helena burst in then, summoned perhaps by spies, her bombazine skirts rustling like dry leaves. "What is this? A clandestine meeting?" "The village assembly tomorrow. I'll expose your schemes, girl. The debts demand propriety, not dalliance." Indignation boiled in Eleanor. The public's fury mirrored in her chest. Helena's plot, preying on grief and vulnerability, a villain unmasked. Edward's hand brushed the air near hers, a silent vow. "No more, Helena. The truth spreads." As she departed, resolve steeling her spine, Reverend Hale's invitation burned in her pocket. The parish assembly at the town hall, a decisive gathering of gentry and merchants. Whispers promised confrontation, Helena's final thrust, or Eleanor's stand. The Cotswolds wines carried omens. Tomorrow's forum would shatter the web, but at what cost to the fragile bond just reforged? The parish assembly convened under the vaulted ceiling of Chipping Campton's town hall, a sturdy timbered structure that had witnessed centuries of village reckonings. December's chill seeped through the stone walls, but the room thrummed with warmth from packed bodies, gentry in their finest woolens, merchants like Uncle Reginald in starched cravats, farmers huddled at the back. Candle sconces flickered, casting long shadows over rows of wooden benches, the air thick with pipe smoke and murmured speculation. Eleanor Hargrove entered at Edward's side, her hand lightly on his offered arm, a gesture of alliance, not intimacy, but bold enough to hush the crowd. She wore a simple gown of deep green merino, its high neckline modest, a shawl of cream lace borrowed from Aunt Margaret draping her shoulders. No jewels. Her only adornment was the silver raven brooch, pinned prominently now, a defiant emblem. Edward, tall and resolute in his tailored black coat, silver threads glinting in his dark hair, nodded to acquaintances. His grey eyes swept the room, steady as the hills outside. At 35, he embodied the estate's unyielding strength, but tonight, vulnerability edged his posture, the debts exposed, his trust in Eleanor a quiet anchor. Amelia waited at home with a nursemaid, safe from the fray. Reverend Hale had called the gathering under guise of holiday charities, but all knew the truth. Scandals demanded air, and Helena Thorpe's web hung taut. The assembly stirred as Helena swept in, her bombazine skirts whispering like conspirators. Flanked by her nephew, Sir Bertram Langford, a pinched man of 40 with a baronet's title but shallow pockets, she carried a leather dossier under one arm, her lace cap pinned like a crown of thorns. Whispers rippled. The debts, the governess's fall, the Marquess's isolation. "See how she clings to him," a matron hissed near the front, bold as brass after the storm's impropriety. Reverend Hale mounted the low dais, his voice booming for order. "Friends, we gather for unity, not division, but truths must surface. Mrs. Thorpe, you sought this forum. Speak." Helena ascended, her sharp features lit by candlelight, eyes locking on Eleanor like daggers. Thank you, Reverend. The Marquess of Ashford's house, Blackwood Hall, pride of our Cotswolds, faces peril not from weather but from within. She opened the dossier with a flourish, papers rustling. Debts from the wars plague the estate, mortgages on the woods, loans unpaid. I, as kin and guardian to young Lady Amelia, urge a prudent alliance. Sir Bertram offers stability. Her gaze slid to Eleanor, venomous. But scandal festers. This governess, Miss Hargrove, wormed in under charity's veil. Overnight stays, whispered poetry in libraries, unbecoming. I hold witness statements. She brandished sheets forged in haste, a maid's testimony of wandering halls, a false letter purporting Eleanor's advances, bought with promises to village gossips like Widow Grant. Gasps echoed. Uncle Reginald shifted uncomfortably beside Aunt Margaret, who clutched her fan. Lydia and Kitty, seated midway, exchanged triumphant smirks, their earlier barbs now public vindication. The community leaned in, judgment forming. Eleanor from humiliated shadow to wanton climber, Edward the duped widower. Class lines hardened. A governess's audacity threatened the order they cherished. Helena pressed on, voice rising. See this letter, penned by her own hand, or so it claims. My lord, your grief calls to mine. Let us wander as souls unbound. Scandal! Dismiss her, my lord, before it touches Amelia. Marry wisely, secure the hall. The room erupted in murmurs, heads turning to Eleanor. Shame burned her cheeks, but she met Edward's gaze, a silent cue, trust forged in storms. He rose then, his presence commanding silence. Mrs. Thorpe, he said, voice even but edged like steel, your concern for Blackwood touches me, but truths cut deeper than whispers. From his coat he drew the Wordsworth volume, its pages marked, and the letter Eleanor had returned, the one to Eliza, exposing Helena's leverage. Reverend Hale stepped forward, key witness in the light. I hold records, friends. Mrs. Thorpe queried loans thrice, pressing Sir Bertram's suit to claim the debts. No governess impropriety, storm-bound innocence, verified by staff logs. He produced the parish diary, entries stark. Helena's visits, her signatures on queries. Edward continued, strategy unfolding like a well-played hand. This letter, forged. Compare inks, mine true, hers a mimic, and witnesses, bribed. Jenkins, my butler, speaks now. The loyal servant, summoned from the wings, testified plainly. Mrs. Thorpe cornered the maids, offered coin for tales. The overnight, lessons by firelight, nothing more. Miss Hargrove brought joy to Lady Amelia, light to our halls. Proofs cascaded. The real letter to Eliza, debts acknowledged but managed through honest trade, not forced marriage. Eleanor's voice joined, steady, moral choice blazing. I came for duty, not dalliance. Loss binds us, my parents' accident, your Eliza's passing, but slander, it wounds the innocent. Helena preys on grief for gain, twisting charity to chains. The counterattack landed, intelligent and unyielding. Helena paled, dossier trembling. Lies, all lies to shield her assent. But the tide turned. Uncle Reginald stood, voice gruff. Enough! Eleanor's family, her honour's ours. Matrons nodded. Reverend Hale's words reframing from pariah to protector. Eleanor respected for courage, her quiet strength a beacon. Applause swelled, sparse at first, then thunderous. Sir Bertram slunk back, Helena exposed, her schemes crumbling, public humiliation etching her face. She fled the dais, nephew in tow, whispers chasing, schemer, fortune hunter. Edward turned to Eleanor amid the hush, his hand brushing hers in the crowd's swell, a tacit commitment, eyes promising futures unbound by shadows. The assembly dissolved into relieved chatter, community healed, victory cathartica washing over them like spring rain. Yet as they stepped into the frosted night, stars piercing the Cotswold sky, A profound silence fell. No words needed. Their bond, sealed in trial, whispered of hearth and home. But what intimate vow would the morrow bring, now that storms had cleared? If this tale of hidden glances and triumphant hearts has you hooked, hit that like button to show your support. We're just getting to the sweetest part. The frost-kissed roads of Chipping Campden wound like silver threads under the January moon, carrying Edward Blackwood's carriage back toward Blackwood Hall. Eleanor sat beside him, the warmth of his presence a quiet shield against the night's chill. The assembly's echoes lingered, the gasps, the turning heads, Helena's hasty retreat. But now, in this intimate hush, resolution settled like fresh snow. No more shadows, the web of deceit lay unravelled, truths laid bare before the parish. Edward's hand rested near hers on the seat, not touching, but close enough to promise the equality they had earned through fire. "Helena's schemes end tonight," Edward murmured, his voice low as the carriage's rumble. "The debts. They'll be settled honourably without her grasping alliances." Sir Bertram withdraws his suit. The baronetcy crumbles under scrutiny. "I've instructed my solicitor to sever her allowances, exile to her distant kin in Yorkshire, where her whispers can't reach. No more guardianship. Amelia deserves peace." Eleanor nodded, her green merino gown pooling around her like a verdant hill. At 22, she felt transformed, not the shadowed companion, but a woman of voice and choice. Justice, at last. The village sees her now for what she is, a predator cloaked in propriety. Reverend Hale's testimony sealed it. Even Uncle Reginald spoke for me. The Beaumonts. They'll heal, in time. The carriage crested the hill, Blackwood Hall emerging from the mist, its pale stone glowing softly. Lanterns flickered in the windows, welcoming beacons. Inside, the foyer hummed with subdued energy, servants polishing silver, fires stoked high. Amelia awaited in the drawing room, her small form curled on a settee with a doll, nursemaid at her side. The child's blue eyes lit upon seeing Eleanor. "Miss Eleanor! Papa said you won the words at the hall. Is the bad lady gone?" Edward knelt, drawing his daughter close. "Gone, sweet one. No more storms." He glanced at Eleanor, compassion in his gaze, a father's tenderness mirroring the leader he had become. Debts no longer a chain, but a call to stewardship. "You've taught her resilience, Eleanor, and me, to trust beyond duty." Supper was simple, intimate. Roast pheasant from the estate's woods, bread warm from the ovens, claret poured with steady hands. No grand table. They ate by the hearth, Amelia between them, chattering of lessons resumed. Transformation shone in Edward's posture, shoulders eased, laughter genuine as he recounted a childhood prank on the estate, his silver-threaded hair catching the firelight. Eleanor, too, spoke freely, her voice gaining strength, tales of her parents' library, dreams of a school for village girls, where orphans like her might find wings. Leadership bloomed in her words, no longer whispered but declared. As Amelia yawned and was carried off to bed, Edward led Eleanor to the library, their sanctuary from the storm. Bookshelves loomed, but tonight, a side table held something new, a velvet box unadorned. He opened it, revealing a simple gold band, etched with intertwined vines, no heirlooms tainted by Eliza's memory, no raven symbols of past burdens. By choice, Eleanor, not title or convenience, but as equals. Will you stand with me? Share this hall, this life? Her heart swelled, tears pricking. No knee, no flourish, just raw intent, eyes locked in the fire's glow. "Yes, Edward, for the futures we build, not the losses we mourn." She extended her hand and he slipped the ring on, its weight a vow unshadowed. They leaned close, foreheads touching in silence. Then, softly, his lips met hers, a kiss born of love, tender and triumphant, sealing their bond amid the scent of leather and wax. Dawn brought the new equilibrium, legal threads tied neatly. Edward's solicitor arrived with parchments, debts restructured through wool trade partnerships, Uncle Reginald's guild rewarded with exclusive contracts, his ledgers balanced, position elevated among merchants. Aunt Margaret, repositioned from critic to ally, penned apologies over tea, her ambitions redirected to matchmaking Lydia and Kitty with suitable locals, their flirtations tempered by the scandal's lesson. The cousins, chastened, offered halting olive branches, Lydia's Weir family after all, a start to mending. Helena's fall was concrete, letters dispatched, her trunks packed by noon, carriage bound for the north under grey skies. Whispers in the village turned to her exile, prestige lost, kin shunning the schemer. Reverend Hale, honoured, planned the legacy, a small schoolhouse on estate land, funded by Edward's charities, with Eleanor at its helm. Books from the library would stock its shelves, lessons in letters and law for girls of all stations. "A beacon," Edward said, signing the deed. "Like you." By midday, they walked the gardens, Amelia skipping ahead with a basket of evergreens for Yuletide. The horizon stretched, Cotswolds hills rolling to infinity, promising harvests and hearths. Edward's arm encircled Eleanor's waist, their steps synced. Transformation complete. He, once adrift in guilt, now led with open heart. She, from periphery to partner, her compassion a guiding light. The kiss from the night lingered, a memory etched in joy. Yet as they paused at the terrace, a rider approached from the drive, bearing a sealed missive from London, word of parliamentary reforms, perhaps an appointment for Edward on estate welfare. He broke the seal, smiling. Change comes, and with it, more to build. Eleanor squeezed his hand, the ring warm against her skin. Their story, far from ended, unfolded toward uncharted springs. 5 years had woven their gentle spell over the Cotswolds, turning the crisp winters of 1815 into the blooming summers of 1820. Blackwood Hall stood prouder now, its pale stone warmed by the sun, gardens lush with roses and lavender that Eleanor had planted with her own hands. The air hummed with bees and children's laughter, a far cry from the shadowed halls of old scandals. Eleanor Blackwood, Marchioness of Ashford, walked the terrace at dawn, her dark curls loose under a simple straw bonnet, the empire waist gown of soft muslin flowing around her like a summer breeze. At 27, time had softened her features, adding a quiet radiance born of contentment. No longer the orphaned companion, she was mistress here, mother and partner, her reserve blooming into a strength that anchored the estate. Edward emerged from the library doors, his step light, despite the years etching faint lines around his storm-grey eyes. 40 now, the silver at his temples had spread, but his broad shoulders carried no burden of grief, only the easy grace of a man redeemed by love. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close in the morning mist. "Another perfect day," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Amelia's lessons await, and the little ones stir." Their marriage, sealed in a quiet ceremony at the parish church that January, had defied the village's lingering whispers. No grand London affair, just family, Reverend Hale presiding, and a simple ring exchange under yew trees heavy with frost. The love that sparked with a single glance had endured, deepening through trials into a partnership of equals. Edward's debts, restructured with Reginald Beaumont's wool guild, had lifted like fog, prosperous trade routes to Manchester securing the estate without a whisper of forced alliances. Helena Thorpe paid dearly for her schemes. Exiled to a draughty cottage in Yorkshire, her nephew's baronetcy crumbling under exposed forgeries, she lived in obscurity, shunned by kin who decried her grasping heart. Letters from her arrived rarely, bitter and pleading, but Edward burned them unread, his compassion reserved for the worthy. Eleanor leaned into him, watching the horizon where Chipping Campton's honeyed cottages dotted the green hills. "Look there," she said softly, pointing to the schoolhouse on the estate's edge. A sturdy building of local stone, its windows aglow with morning light. Funded by Edward's charities and her vision, it served 20 girls now, from village orphans to daughters of merchants. Lessons in reading, arithmetic, and poetry filled the days, Eleanor's hand guiding the curriculum. No more shadows for girls like her once was. Futures opened wide, legacies built on knowledge, not marriage alone. Amelia, 10 and spirited, dashed from the house then, her riding habit muddied from the stables. "Mama, Papa, the pony's ready, will you come?" Behind her trailed their own children, young Edward, 4. With his father's grey eyes and a mop of dark curls, clutching a wooden horse, and little Eliza, 2, toddling after with chubby fists full of daisies, her laughter a trill that echoed Eleanor's lullabies. The girl bore her namesake's gentle spirit, but thrived in the light of a mother's care, no fever's shadow, only boundless joy. Edward scooped up Eliza, planting a kiss on her rosy cheek. "In a moment, sprite, first, your mamma and I must speak of grown things." He set her down, watching as Amelia led the boy away, their voices fading into the gardens. Turning back to Eleanor, his gaze softened, nostalgia threading his words. 5 years, and still, that glance at the fair haunts me. You saw me, truly, beyond the title, the losses. She touched his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "And you me, from companion to this. It's a dream woven real." Tears pricked her eyes, emotions swelling like the hills around them. The Beaumonts had changed too. Uncle Reginald prospered, his guild thriving on Ashford contracts, his jovial nature restored. Aunt Margaret, humbled, doted on grandchildren during visits, her ambitions channeled into village teas. Lydia wed a kind solicitor from Stowe, her flirtations matured into quiet happiness. Kitty followed to a merchant's son, their homes nearby, bridges mended over shared suppers. But prices lingered in memory. Eleanor's isolation, those scandalous months had scarred, teaching resilience. Edward's guilt over Eliza's death eased, but visits to her grave brought reflective silences. Yet love resisted time's pull, stronger for the forging. They walked arm in arm to the schoolhouse, where girls curtsied and smiled, one shy orphan echoing Eleanor's old reserve. "Milady, your book on Wordsworth, it's changed my world." Eleanor knelt, hugging the child. "Then my heart's full." As the sun climbed, Edward watched, pride swelling. Their family gathered at noon, picnic under ancient oaks, laughter mingling with birdsong. Eliza napped in Eleanor's lap. Young Edward recited verses haltingly. Amelia dreamed of London seasons under their guidance. The Cotswolds stretched eternal, a tapestry of green and gold. In quiet evenings by the hearth they read together, Wordsworth's pages worn thinner, the silver raven brooch now a nursery heirloom. Nostalgia wrapped them like a shawl, trials remembered not as wounds, but foundations. Edward's kiss, soft on her temple, sealed the day. "Too many more," he whispered. And as stars pricked the twilight sky, Eleanor knew their story, born of a glance, endured, a triumphant hearth against the world's winds. As the sun dipped below the Cotswolds hills, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, Eleanor and Edward lingered on the terrace of Blackwood Hall, their hands entwined in a quiet testament to the journey that had brought them here. 5 years had transformed not just their lives, but the very fabric of the village around them. The schoolhouse bells rang softly in the distance, calling the girls home from their lessons, a melody of progress that echoed the resilience of the human spirit. Eleanor turned to Edward, her eyes reflecting the fading light, and whispered, "We've built something enduring, haven't we? From that one glance at the fair, through storms of scandal and shadow, to this peace." Edward nodded, pulling her closer, his voice warm with the depth of shared memory. Indeed. Love isn't just a spark, it's the fire that forges us anew. You taught me that, Eleanor. In a world of rigid expectations and hidden debts, your courage showed me that true strength lies in vulnerability, in choosing trust over isolation. Their story, woven from the threads of loss and longing, offered lessons as timeless as the rolling hills. First, the power of a single, honest glance, to see beyond titles and tragedies, to recognize a kindred soul amid the crowd. Eleanor's quiet poise had pierced Edward's guarded heart, reminding us all that connection blooms not in grand gestures, but in moments of raw authenticity. Second, the peril of unchecked ambition, embodied by Helena's downfall. Her schemes, born of greed and manipulation, crumbled under the weight of truth, teaching that justice prevails when the innocent stand firm. No villain goes unpunished in the end. The community, once divided, united in reframing slander as sabotage, restoring honor where it was due. And third, the triumph of agency over adversity. Eleanor's evolution from shadowed companion to marchioness wasn't handed to her. It was claimed through letters penned in defiance, testimonies sought in vicars' studies, and choices made in the face of exile. She showed that women, even in an era of corsets and curtsies, could reshape their fates, building legacies like the schoolhouse that now empowered a generation. Edward, too, grew from a widower bound by guilt to a leader embracing openness, his debts settled not by forced alliances, but by honest partnerships that lifted families like the Beaumonts. Their love, tested by gales and gossip, proved unbreakable, a beacon for anyone navigating society's tempests. It whispered that redemption awaits those who dare to reveal their scars, that family, blood or chosen, can mend when pride yields to compassion. Lydia and Kitty, once rivals, now visited with their own children, their flirtatious youths matured into stable joys, bridges rebuilt over shared laughter at holiday feasts. Even Uncle Reginald's wool trade flourished, a ripple of prosperity from the alliances forged in truth. As twilight deepened, Edward raised a glass of claret from the terrace table, toasting the stars emerging overhead, to glances that change everything and hearts that endure. Eleanor smiled, the silver raven brooch glinting on her gown, a relic turned symbol of victory. Their children played in the gardens below, Amelia guiding her siblings with the same gentle wisdom their mother had shown her. The future stretched like the endless Cotswolds paths, full of promise, unshadowed by the past. If this tale of whispered scandals and heartfelt triumphs has stirred your soul, dear listener, take a moment to reflect on its gifts. What glance in your life sparked a turning point? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how stories like Eleanor's resonate with you. And to show you've journeyed to the very end with us, write the word glance in your reply. It'll warm my heart and help spread this narrative to others seeking inspiration. For more romances laced with Regency intrigue and emotional depth, check the cards above. Tales of forbidden loves and resilient spirits await. Until next time, may your own stories unfold with the same triumphant grace.